As ever, absolutely inspirational, Nigel. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you, Jonathan, for being the precursor to Nigel. We now, ladies and gentlemen, have roughly 30 minutes of questions, and many of you have taken the advantage of that opportunity, and this lovely EFDD blue-coloured dustbin at my feet, no pun intended, of course, EFDD and, well, more to the point, the EU, contains a number of questions, and I will draw those out. I will, where I can, direct them to one of our two speakers, and then we will continue on with the evening. So, first question. Now that the SNP and Jeremy, I assume Corbyn, are joining forces to reject our exit from the European Union, what has Nigel got in mind to combat this? Sounds like it's a question for you, Nigel.
Well, Jeremy Corbyn, now there's a thought. Just after he was elected, I was watching television and Diane Abbott was on, and she knows, well, no, she knows quite a lot about Jeremy Corbyn, actually, and she said that she thought that Jeremy Corbyn would appeal to UKIP voters in the Midlands and the North who'd switched from the Labour Party to UKIP. And you can just see the scene, can't you? You know, knock at the door. Hello, we're canvassing for Jeremy Corbyn. We understand you've switched to UKIP, but we're here to get you back. And we've got some great news. Jeremy's been great mates with the IRA for the last 30 years. He wants to give away the Falkland Islands to Argentina and thinks we should abolish the Queen and the British Army. Well, bring it on, please. Bring it on. The only good thing I can say about Jeremy Corbyn is that for 40 years he's taken the Tony Benn line on the European Union. And Tony Benn always opposed the EU because Tony Benn believed in parliamentary democracy. And it's a great shame he's not around to fight this referendum. But Corbyn, having believed those things, now faces a backbench Labour Party, indeed a frontbench Labour Party, that has been so taken in with the European project that he now apparently has changed his mind. So yes, Corbyn will be for staying in whatever happens. The SNP will be for staying in whatever happens. Wouldn't it be funny when the United Kingdom votes to leave the EU and take back its independence, Sturgeon is talking about having a referendum in Scotland against independence. How about that? So that's rather fun, isn't it? The Lib Dems will be for in, and Mr Cameron and most of his ambitious young backbenchers and frontbenchers will be for in, and Goldman Sachs will be for in, and many of the multinationals will be for in, and sections of our media will be for in, but don't underestimate the power of the People's Army who are for out, and we will not be stopped.
Jonathan, in the event of a close result in the referendum, would you rule out a second referendum in much the same way as Nicola Sturgeon has not ruled out a second independence referendum in Scotland?
Well, that's a question like a grenade with a pin taken out of it, isn't it? I think from my point of view, the question is this. Does the referendum that we end up having actually end up being a full, free, fair, honest debate between both sides, where the British people have the full information and the full opportunity to make that decision? If you look back in the 1970s to the referendum that we had on staying in what was called the Common Market, if you look at the booklets which were put by the government, propaganda through every single door in the country, and they said things like there was a threat that being part of this common market would mean a loss of essential national sovereignty. That threat has now gone. So when the government told us that in the 1970s, and they were lying through their teeth, I think people who have been duped and deceived by that, because they never really truly heard the opposing case, would very well say, hang on a second, I want another go, now I know the truth. So there's a very, very big question there. Is the referendum that we get going to be a properly fair one? I'm a believer in democracy, but I'm also a great believer in playing by the rules.
I think it's worth remembering one thing. If it wasn't for us, there wouldn't be a referendum. We forced them into doing this. We have to win this referendum, but we have to try to win it well. And the reason I say this is that Denmark voted no in a referendum to the Maastricht Treaty and were forced to vote again. The Irish voted no to the Nice Treaty. The Irish voted no to the Lisbon Treaty, and both times were forced to vote again. The French voted no to the European Constitution. The Dutch overwhelmingly voted no to the European Constitution. They were ignored, and they rebranded it as the Lisbon Treaty and continued. We have to not just win this referendum, we have to win it well, and after we've won it, we have to make sure that our Parliament does not break the bond that it has with the British people, and we must be on our guard until we have succeeded in an amicable divorce with a political Europe and its replacement with a genuine free trade agreement, and then we can all relax and have a proper party.
Nigel, how would you counter the economic argument put forward by Lord Rose in favour of staying in the EU today? You touched on it briefly, but can I ask you to expand for a few more minutes?
Well, Rose's economic argument, it seemed to be that if we weren't in the European Union, all trade would cease, they wouldn't buy our widgets, and, you know, before finishing up living in caves, we would be worse off by £3,000 per year per person. This is a very tired old argument that is put in defence of the European Union. It says, unless you're in a political union, you can't do business. Folks, governments don't do business. You do business. Consumers do business. Consumers choose to buy, you know, a CD player or a motor car or whatever else it may be. And before I was in politics, and here's a real confession, because compared to everybody else in politics, one of the great sins of my past is that I had a job for 20 years. How about that? One of the things I learned from running my own business is the customer is king. And given that we buy £50 billion worth a year more of goods from the European Union than we sell to them, we actually are the ones who have the power and have the say. And Rose's argument that all trade would cease is not only a nonsense in Europe, but nowhere else around the rest of the world would they pretend that. And Rose's argument that we're safer sticking with what we know, well, I would counter that by saying, who's to say what mess the Eurozone will be in 2, 3 or 5 years from now? Who's to say what legislation will be passed that will damage further British manufacturing or what's left of our fishing industry or small business? I'm sorry, Lord Rose, the EU does not look like the safe and sensible option. Taking back control of the reins over our own destiny makes far more sense.
Jonathan, a question for you. Why are you holding a no to the EU event in an EU-funded building?
An EU-funded building? EU funding. That is money that has come from the British taxpayer. It's not EU money, it's our money. We've heard a lot about Marks and Spencer's, so I'm going to give my Marks and Spencer's analogy. If you were asked, will you pay me £20 for a £10 Marks and Spencer's voucher, I think you'd say no. But that's exactly what we're doing with the European Union today. We hand over to them £55 million plus every single day. We get a fraction of that back, and just like the Marks and Spencer's voucher, it can only be spent in certain ways. So, if that money has gone on a haul like this, either it's the best use of taxpayers' money, in which case we could have done it ourselves, or it's not the best use of taxpayers' money, in which case we're actually getting an even worse deal out of being members of the European Union than we are doing at the moment. And if being here at Sage Gateshead highlights that, well, all for the better.
Nigel, you're famed for your plain speaking. What powers are now ceded to the British Parliament, from the British Parliament to the European Union?
Well, we could go to a long list of areas over which the EU now virtually makes all of our law. I talked about fishing, we could talk about direction of farming policy, we could talk about employment regulation, we could talk about health and safety at work regulation, we could talk about environmental law, energy policy, the list could go on. There's a never-ending argument about what percentage of our laws is made somewhere else. Even Gordon Brown, who did his best to defend the European Union, said that over 50% of our laws were made somewhere else. Our figure, we guess, is about 75%. When a former German president did an analysis of this, his figure was that 84% of German national law was now made by the institutions of the European Union. But ultimately, the real answer to the question is this. Rather than getting nitpicky about individual legislation, just think of this. There is no law that is passed by the European Union that can be struck down by all 651 of our MPs and/or our Supreme Court. Their law is supreme over our law, something I suspect that many of you in this room who voted yes to the common market in 1975 simply weren't told. You cannot be an independent, self-governing nation and a member of this European Union. So if you think about it, literally, we have given away the ability to run our country. And that sheer level of betrayal, done by stealth, done by lies, now is our moment not to moan at them, not to get mad, but to vote no and to get even.
Jonathan, do you think the UK government should have done more to save the steelworks at Redcar?
Yes!
Well, I could give a one-word answer and say, yes, of course they should. But I think I probably ought to expand on that at least a little bit. I take the view that our government should be standing up for British interests and for British industry. I think sometimes our government forgets that what has happened to our manufacturing in this country, that if you look at the closure of the coal mines, for example, our government forgets just how deeply and how badly that damages communities, some of which still haven't yet recovered fully today, even 20, 30 years on. I live in Gisborough, just round the corner from Redcar. And I've spent quite a bit of time in Redcar. And you can see when you are in Redcar that it is struggling economically already before these 1,700 job losses. It's already an area of high unemployment. And I just asked myself the question, where are we going to get another 1,700 jobs from in Redcar? Where are we going to get the jobs to replace all the people who supplied SSI? And I just take the view that if you think about it logically and strategically, the costs of all the benefits we've got to pay to those people, the costs that we incur through not having taxation coming in, the costs that we incur because actually a business which in the long term would have been profitable will never get any more tax revenue in from them. And actually, if we looked at that strategically, we'd have been better off to provide the right kind of targeted help now to ensure that that industry stays, because now that it closes, what happens to the skills? The skills quite likely disappear for our economy forever. And I think you have to take a very long, hard look in government before you allow skills to disappear forever from an economy. So, yes, we should have done more. I'd have loved the government to stick the proverbial two fingers up at the European Union and say, we are going to help our workers because it is the right thing to do and it's in Britain's best interest to do so.
Nigel, why can't the Leave campaign unite behind one organisation?
Well, there are at the moment... Well, OK, let's talk about the Stay campaign. So the Stay campaign, headed up by Lord Rose today, the Labour Party weren't there, they're not joining it, they're doing their own thing. The SNP weren't there, they're not joining it, they're doing their own thing. What we have on our side of the argument are two groups bidding to be the umbrella group. One, a Westminster-based group making business arguments and with some prominent business figures. The other, Leave.eu, a non-party political organisation which is aiming to reach out to millions of people on the questions of controlling our own country and controlling our own borders. Leave.eu already have 200,000 registered supporters in 8 weeks. And the other camp in Westminster have got some very bright people and some big business figures. We're UKIP. Our campaign is we will join hands and work with anybody that will fight from across the spectrum. And I hope and believe that the different skill sets and the different target audiences of these two groups can be brought together, and I will do everything I can as an honest broker to bring those sides round the table to present one simple, straightforward campaign. It will happen.
Jonathan, your last question, please, for this evening. What is your opinion on postal voting fraud? And maybe you would like to respond on the basis of the European elections.
I think we're against it, aren't we?
Exactly. I believe that democracy is a hard-earned right that the British people have gained over generation after generation through struggle from the suffragettes, through people who believed in democracy. It's a right that has been defended through war, through the First and Second World Wars. I believe that democracy is something which should matter to all of us. I place a very, very high value on democracy. Therefore, I believe that we should also place a very, very high value on the integrity of our democratic system and our democratic process, and that therefore we should maintain the very highest standards when it comes to voting. That when people apply for a postal vote, that should be done on an individual basis, in the right way, for a reason, so that we know that the people who are having a postal vote are genuine people. We don't want to take any chances with the great British democracy. And whilst we're on the subject of the EU referendum, I believe that the people who should take that decision of whether Great Britain should be a member of the European Union or not should be the British people.
Nigel, the final question this evening. Why is mention never made in yours and other speeches that two of the richest countries in Europe, Norway and Switzerland, are not EU members? If they can survive outside and successfully, surely we can.
Well, I have to say, thank you, Diane. I have to say that I've said it thousands of times over the years, that the two richest countries in the European time zone per capita are Norway and Switzerland, and if they can get, as relatively small countries, if they can get the right trading relationship with Europe, then I'm damn certain that Britain, with its massive trade deficit with Europe, and given that we're now their biggest trading partner in the world, can get an even better relationship with Europe, but more excitingly, open ourselves up to the growing, emerging, new economies in the world, starting with many of them that are there in the Commonwealth. So, no, I won't ignore Norway, I won't ignore Switzerland, and should I say some words to close, or how are we going to do this?
I'm going to close with
right,
you.
You close with me.
Oh, I will
Come
close
on.
with you. My goodness, there's an EFDD loving going on this evening. Right, to Gateshead, to the northeast. Thank you for your welcome this evening. Thank you for being here, whether you joined us here physically at this centre or whether you joined us via the internet or via social media. It's my good fortune and my pleasure to thank Nigel, Jonathan, Steve for their contribution this evening, for responding to your questions, but most importantly for the input that you gave. Now, the Say No to the EU tour will continue. I've got the pleasure of speaking with Nigel and with other EFDD MEP colleagues across the country. Please, after you've been here this evening, make sure your friends, your family members, your work colleagues know about these events, know that you can come and listen to speakers of the calibre you've heard tonight, but more importantly, that they will put to you the realities and the implications of continued EU membership. From my point of view, I've had a fantastic evening, the usual really, really warm and sincere welcome from the North East. Personally, thank you, travel safe and good night. Nigel, close to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming along. We're getting massive audiences in the four corners of the United Kingdom. People care about this. People know something exciting is going on. Thank you for coming. Have you enjoyed it? Yeah. Are you with us? Yeah. Do you want your country back? Yeah. Well, do something about it. Thank you.